The experiment conducted by Russian scientists during World War II aimed to keep soldiers awake for longer periods. They selected 5 prisoners of war and promised them freedom in exchange for participating. The experiment involved sealing the prisoners in a gas chamber and continuously administering an experimental stimulant gas to keep them awake. However, the details of the gas and its effects were unknown. The experiment did not have closed-circuit cameras to monitor the subjects. As the experiment progressed, the researchers noticed a shift in the behavior of the subjects. Initially, there was small talk among them, but around the 4th day, the conversations turned darker, focusing on traumatic events from their lives. By the 6th day, the subjects began expressing regret for participating in the experiment and stopped communicating with each other. They became paranoid and isolated themselves within the chamber, even distrusting their fellow subjects. Despite having basic amenities like food, water, and books, they became fixated on the idea of betraying each other to escape the experiment. As the experiment progressed, the subjects resorted to whispering imagined accusations against each other, hoping to gain favor with the researchers and be released from the experiment. However, the researchers remained indifferent to their pleas. On the 10th day, the situation took a drastic turn. One of the subjects began screaming uncontrollably, running back and forth in the chamber for 3 hours. Eventually, the screaming stopped, but the subject continued making faint, squeaking sounds, indicating extreme distress and suffering. The screaming subject had torn his vocal cords from continuous screaming, yet the other subjects remained indifferent to his distress. Instead, they tore pages from the books, soaked them, and covered the porthole window, blocking the researchers' view into the chamber. When the screaming stopped and the room fell silent, the researchers couldn't observe the subjects anymore, despite monitoring oxygen levels, indicating that some subjects were alive. 3 days of eerie silence followed. Faced with the escalating tension and disturbing behavior of the subjects, the researchers opted to engage with them via the intercom system. In a bid to alleviate the growing unease and perhaps gain insight into the subject's state of mind, they extended an offer of immediate release and freedom. This offer came with a condition. The subjects had to adhere to specific instructions, namely to lie on the ground and refrain from any interaction when the researchers entered the chamber. The researchers used the intercom to communicate with the subjects, offering them immediate release and freedom if they complied with instructions to lie on the ground and not interact. One of the subjects responded, stating they no longer desired to be freed. Despite this, silence persisted until the 15th day when the researchers decided to end the experiment. At midnight on the 15th day, they stopped the continuous administration of the experimental stimulant gas and replaced it with fresh air. To their horror, they heard screams from the subjects, begging them to turn the gas back on, as if they were facing imminent death. In a chilling scene reminiscent of a horror movie, the chamber was finally opened after 10 days, revealing a grisly sight. While 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, the 5th had tragically perished. Shockingly, chunks of flesh from his chest and leg were found jammed into the drain, amidst a room flooded with 4 inches of murky water. Equally disturbing was the discovery that all 4 surviving subjects had inflicted wounds upon themselves, tearing off pieces of their flesh by hand. Strangely, they did not consume the flesh they had torn off. The subjects, driven to madness, had resorted to cannibalism and adamantly refused to leave the chamber, pleading for the gas to be reinstated. Soldiers were summoned to extract them, but the situation quickly escalated into violence. One subject fatally bit a soldier's neck while another succumbed to a ruptured spleen during the struggle. The 3 remaining subjects were tightly restrained and transported to a medical facility for urgent surgery to address their self-inflicted injuries. The scene in the medical facility was tense, as the subject's resistance to anesthesia heightened the sense of urgency among the medical team. Despite their best efforts to calm him and prepare him for surgery, his relentless struggle against sedation posed a significant challenge. With each passing moment, the gravity of the situation intensified as they grappled with the dilemma of ensuring his cooperation while addressing his urgent medical needs. As the subject's resistance persisted, the medical staff found themselves facing an unprecedented level of physical and psychological strain. The sheer force with which he resisted sedation underscored the profound mystery surrounding the experiment's outcomes. Their attempts to manage the situation with care and precision reflected the delicate balance between medical intervention and ethical considerations in the face of unprecedented circumstances. Joffrey's resistance to anesthesia ultimately led to his demise, followed by the subject who had torn his vocal cords and similarly fought against being anesthetized. The last surviving subject, unable to speak due to his torn vocal cords, also exhibited resistance to anesthesia. He eventually succumbed to exhaustion and passed out, which ultimately resulted in his death once he fell unconscious. Puzzled by the deaths occurring under anesthesia, the scientists decided against proceeding with surgery on the last survivor. Instead, they planned to return him to the chamber and resume administering the gas. To closely monitor his brain activity and unravel the mystery behind the fatal outcomes, they connected him to an EEG, a device that measures brain waves, for further observation. This meticulous monitoring aimed to provide insights into the relationship between sleep, brain function, and mortality in the context of the disturbing experiment. As the scientists closely monitored the last survivor's brain activity using the EEG, they noticed a concerning pattern. His brain waves would periodically flatline, indicating moments of apparent brain death. Upon closer examination, they realized that these flatlines coincided with brief periods when the subject closed his eyes, suggesting micro-sleep episodes. Recognizing the similarity to the previous deaths, they understood that the subject was experiencing brain death each time he fell asleep. Fearing the worst, the scientists urgently rushed to turn the gas back on in an attempt to keep him alive. Despite their efforts and the realization of the critical connection between sleep and death in this experiment, they could not prevent the inevitable. The subject eventually succumbed to sleep and met the same fate as the others, leaving the researchers perplexed and haunted by the mystery surrounding the experiment's fatal outcomes. The subjects in the story, after experiencing extreme sleep deprivation and exposure to experimental gas, eventually fell into a deep sleep and subsequently died, with their heart stopping. The exact cause of their deaths remains unknown, leaving speculation about whether it was due to sleep deprivation, gas, or a combination of both. However, it's important to note that this story is purely fictional, with no evidence to support its occurrence in reality. The story of the Russian sleep experiment, while likely fictional, reflects a period during World War II when unethical human experimentation occurred, such as Unit 731 in Japan and experiments in Germany. While the specifics of the Russian sleep experiment may not be true, the possibility of similar studies during that era cannot be discounted. The study of sleep and sleep deprivation remains important, as the consequences of prolonged sleep deprivation can be severe, potentially leading to death. Despite advancements in understanding sleep, many aspects of it remain mysterious.